What if I told you that somewhere on the American internet, people once voted, in real time, on how a stranger would suffer? No headlines, no arrests, no bodies, just silence. And the people watching weren't criminals hiding in basements. They were ordinary Americans. This is not a creepypasta. This is not a movie plot. This is the dark web mystery. The US government refuses to explain. Most dark web stories are fake, scams, urban legends. But this one triggered a classified federal investigation, and it started with a single sentence that should never exist online. In late 2016, a cybersecurity researcher from Oregon, known only as Spectre, was crawling the Tor network. Spectre hunted illegal marketplaces for a living. He knew what fake looked like. Then his system flagged something impossible: a private onion address with no backlinks, no hosting fingerprints, no index traces, only 4 words buried in the code. Live only once. When he clicked the link, there was no website, just a black screen, and a timer counting down, 2.09, and a message that felt personal. If you are watching, you are already involved. What happened when the timer hit 0 is the reason Spectre vanished forever. The screen flickered. A concrete room came into focus. A single bulb swinging slowly. A man seated in the center, face hidden, no sound. Then the chat window opened. Hundreds of users appeared instantly. Names filled with American symbols. Liberty Bell, Patriot X, Watcher 117. Then the screen changed. A poll. Choose A. Water, B. Electricity. The vote percentage began moving. Fast, Spectre shut everything down. Within hours, he contacted federal authorities. Within days, he disappeared. People disappear on the dark web all the time. But when the FBI gets involved, and still nothing is said, that's when you know. This wasn't just a website. Internal leaks later revealed a classified investigation, Operation Black Curtain, not focused on the videos, not focused on the victims, but on the viewers. Despite Tor encryption, analysts noticed something disturbing: repeated access from military-adjacent networks, defense contractor IP ranges, federal infrastructure nodes. Someone powerful was watching, and someone powerful made sure. No one talked. If red rooms were fake, why was the US government tracking the audience? Investigators searched for victims. They found nothing. No missing persons, no fingerprints, no remains, as if the people in the videos had never existed. Then an analyst noticed something hidden, a faint distortion in the background audio. When enhanced, it revealed coordinates. They pointed to abandoned federal facilities, places erased from public records. At this point, the case stopped being about crime and started looking like an experiment. In 2019, an encrypted blog appeared. Author, Null Signal, claimed former US intelligence contractor. He wrote that red rooms weren't entertainment. They were behavioral trials, testing how quickly people obeyed when given power and anonymity. Participants weren't paying customers. They were being evaluated. Null Signal ended with one sentence: if you can vote to hurt a stranger, you can be trained to hurt anyone. 3 posts, then silence, and then the site came back. March 2021, the same onion link reappeared. No countdown, no warning. The video showed an empty chair. Then names appeared. Hundreds of them. Usernames, real names, American names. The message flashed once. The audience is the experiment. The stream cut. The site self-deleted. No arrests, no denials, no explanations. Just budget increases. For dark network behavioral analysis, the dark web isn't scary because of what happens there. It's scary because it shows who people become when no one is watching. If the red rooms were real, if the experiment succeeded, then the most dangerous part was never the victims. It was the viewers. And the question we're left with is simple. Did you ever watch without knowing it? Before we continue, there's something you need to understand. If the red rooms were fake, but it didn't, because after the final broadcast, people started dying. Not violently, not publicly, quietly, and always after asking the same question. How did they know my name? The Red Room mystery didn't end with the shutdown. That's when it began leaking into the real world, after the 2021 broadcast dark web archivists scrambled. They had captured fragments of the final stream. Corrupted frames, partial logs, cached metadata. Most of the names on screen were aliases. But not all. At least 37 names matched real Americans. No criminal records. No dark web history. No obvious connections. Teachers. Engineers. A nurse. A college student. Ordinary people. The common thread. Every single one had accessed Tor once. Only once. How do you end up on a classified dark web list? After visiting one site, one time, cyber analysts noticed something strange. These weren't dark web users. They were beginners, people who had downloaded Tor out of curiosity, clicked a link from a forum or Reddit thread, followed a "this site doesn't exist" rumor. They didn't search for violence. They didn't pay. They didn't vote. They just watched, and yet they were identified, which meant one thing. The Red Room didn't rely on anonymity. It broke it. Tor isn't supposed to fail unless someone lets it. A classified theory began circulating in cyber circles. The Red Rooms weren't hosted on the dark web. They were overlay nodes, sites that existed inside Tor traffic itself, invisible unless you were routed through them. Think of it like this. You didn't visit the Red Room. The Red Room intercepted you. This explained everything. No backlinks, no hosting records, no server seizures, and why only certain people saw it. You don't find the experiment finds you. Leaked analysis suggested something darker. The site tracked cursor hesitation, screen focus, chat scroll behavior, time spent before exiting, not votes, not comments, but reaction, fear, curiosity, indifference. Even closing the page was data. One analyst wrote in a leaked memo, "Non-participation is still a response. You didn't have to choose violence. You just had to stay." Between 2021 and 2023, at least 9 individuals from the leaked name list died. Official causes: heart failure, accidental overdose, single car crashes. No signs of struggle, no investigations. But families reported something disturbing. In the weeks before death, each victim had destroyed personal devices, asked about surveillance laws, mentioned being evaluated. One victim reportedly said, "They already decided." At this point, the Red Room stopped being a mystery. It became a threat. In late 2023, a voice recording leaked briefly on a Russian forum. The speaker claimed to be a U.S. defense subcontractor. His voice shook. He said, "The Red Room was phase 1. Phase 2 is placement." When asked what placement meant, he paused. Then said, "You don't recruit everyone. You filter." The post vanished within minutes. The account never returned. This was never about entertainment. It was about selection. One question haunted investigators. Why were the usernames so patriotic? Liberty, freedom, founding symbols. The answer may be simple and terrifying. According to internal documents, the Red Room targeted ideological confidence. People who believed, "I'd never do something like that. I'm not easily influenced. I just want to see what it is." The system wasn't testing cruelty. It was testing certainty. The strongest minds are the easiest to measure. Even today, cybersecurity researchers report something strange. A dormant packet signature. It doesn't load pages. It doesn't display content. It just passes through Tor traffic silently. Tagged internally as LS01. No explanation. No owner. But when it appears, dark web traffic reroutes for exactly 2.14 seconds, the same length as Spectre's original countdown. The Red Room may be gone, but the system that built it isn't. And if phase 1 was observation, and phase 2 was selection, then asks the most dangerous question of all. What happens after you're chosen? They didn't kidnap anyone. They didn't threaten anyone. They didn't even make contact. At least, not the way you'd expect. Because the people chosen by the Red Room weren't taken. They were invited. If you imagine secret vans and black bags, you're already thinking too small. This was cleaner than that. Of the names identified, not all of them died. Some simply changed. Friends noticed personality shifts, increased discipline, emotional flattening, sudden career redirections. And then quietly, they disappeared from civilian life. No missing persons reports. No panic. Just job resignations followed by silence. One former coworker described it like this. It felt like they had already said goodbye before they left. There was no email, no phone call. So how were they contacted? A cybersecurity linguist uncovered something disturbing. Several selected individuals reported hearing the same sentence within days of disappearing, spoken casually by different people in different states. The phrase, "You passed sooner than expected." No follow-up, no explanation, just the sentence. And somehow, they understood it was meant for them. You don't recruit someone by telling them who you are. You recruit them by proving you already know them. Leaked training materials from an unknown contractor outlined a process called adaptive moral calibration. Step 1, exposure. Step 2, observation. Step 3, identity stress. The Red Room was step 1. The second step happened afterward. Selected individuals were subtly tested. Ethical gray zone choices at work. Authority challenges. Situations where refusal carried consequences. No one failed for saying no. They failed for hesitating. This program didn't want obedience. It wanted alignment. Eventually the offer came. Not in writing. Not verbally. But through opportunity. A job that shouldn't exist. A clearance upgrade without request. A contract that bypassed normal channels. Every offer shared the same characteristics. Temporary. Untraceable. Legally undefined. And one condition, you will not ask what this leads to. Those who declined, they were never contacted again. Those who accepted, they vanished from public systems within 72 hours. This is where records stopped. But the program didn't. An anonymous infrastructure map surfaced briefly online. It showed nodes labeled Cell 12, Cell 19, Cell 33. No locations, no purpose, just staffing numbers. Each cell held between 8 and 12 individuals. Former analysts believed these were not teams. They were compartments. No one knew the full program. Only their piece. You don't hide a crime this well. You hide an outcome. A former contractor, identity unverified, shared a single message before disappearing. They're not training killers. They're training deciders. When asked what that meant, he replied, "People who can act without moral friction. When systems fail, then his account went offline permanently." This wasn't a death squad. It was a contingency. Here's the most disturbing detail. The Red Room never ended. It evolved. Selected recruits were later shown reconstructions of their original viewing session. Their reactions were measured again, but this time, they weren't viewers. They were analysts. Judging others, the experiment had become recursive. At some point, every subject becomes part of the system. Remember the unexplained deaths? Investigators now believe those individuals weren't silenced. They were rejected. People who passed phase 1, but failed phase 2, not eliminated violently, simply allowed to collapse, under pressure. As one document stated, attrition maintains deniability. The Red Room wasn't asking, "Would you hurt someone?" It was asking, "Could you live knowing you didn't?" And in part, we confront the most dangerous truth of all. The program wasn't rogue. It was authorized. And it had a name. The most dangerous lie about the Red Room was that it was illegal. It wasn't. It was classified. And there's a difference. Everyone assumed the Red Room was a rogue operation, a black market experiment, a criminal conspiracy. That assumption protected the truth. Because the program didn't exist outside the system, it existed inside it. Internally, the project had no theatrical title, no dramatic code name, just 3 letters. AMP, Adaptive Moral Profiling, buried across defense budgets, intelligence contracts, and behavioral research grants for nearly 2 decades. Never in one place, never in one document, invisible unless you knew what to look for, because AMP wasn't controversial. It was necessary. The first reference to AMP appeared after a classified crisis in the early 2000s, a moment when systems failed faster than humans could decide. Command chains collapsed, authority froze, and people waited for permission that never came. The after-action conclusion was brutal. We lack personnel capable of autonomous moral execution under systemic failure conditions. Translation? Too many people needed rules. Too few could decide without them. The issue wasn't violence. It was hesitation. Traditional screening failed. Psych evaluations were gamed. Training created conformity. Simulations taught expected behavior. The dark web changed everything. Anonymity removed reputation. Distance removed consequence. And choice became honest. The Red Room wasn't about brutality. It was about exposure to irreversible choice. Even watching was enough. You can't fake your reaction when you think no one is watching. There was no presidential order, no congressional vote. AMP was approved the quiet way, through continuity directives, through emergency frameworks, through clauses that activate only if the system breaks. It didn't require permission. It required silence. Every agency involved only saw a fragment. No one could shut it down because no one technically owned it. You can't expose a program that was never officially alive. AMP wasn't run by intelligence agencies. It was outsourced. Behavioral scientists, private defense firms, data psychology startups with government clients. Each contractor thought they were building a tool. None of them saw the weapon. One leaked memo read, "Ethical discomfort is an indicator, not a flaw." The system didn't care if you suffered, only whether you adapted. By 2020, analysts noticed anomalies, subjects who scored too well, people who showed zero emotional variance, perfect decisiveness, no moral hesitation. They weren't ideal. They were unstable. AMP wasn't filtering leaders. It was starting to create detached operators. The system was selecting for something else, something colder. An internal review, never released, ended with a warning. AMP will eventually recruit individuals whose alignment exceeds their restraint. The recommendation? Suspend Phase 3. The response? Phase 3 was already active. At that moment, the program stopped being preventative. It became predictive. The 2021 broadcast wasn't a leak. It was a stress test, designed to see who would notice, who would investigate, who would panic, who would stay silent. Exposure wasn't a mistake. It was the final metric. AMP wasn't built for today. It was built for the day the system fails completely. We confront the question no one wanted to ask. What happens when the contingency decides the emergency has already begun? You thought the story was over because the system stabilized. That's the mistake. Systems don't end experiments. When they succeed, they expand them. After the failure event, AMP didn't grow louder. It grew quieter. And that's when the second anomaly appeared. In late 2024, a cybersecurity audit flagged something impossible. Tor traffic patterns matching Red Room behavior were appearing again. But no site loaded, no video streamed, no onion address resolved. Yet the data signature was identical, as if millions of people were visiting a place that no longer existed. You can't visit a dead site unless the site isn't the point. Analysts uncovered a disturbing shift. The Red Room no longer required violence, voting, participation. It had become ambient, a background condition. a moral measurement embedded inside ordinary digital behavior. What you scrolled past, what you ignored, what you watched until the end. No Tor required, no dark web required, just observation. The Red Room learned something critical. You don't need darkness to test morality, you just need comfort. AMP abandoned decisiveness as the primary filter. It replaced it with something else. Normalization. How quickly did people accept outcomes they didn't choose? How long before outrage decayed into silence? How often did people say, "That's just how it is now"? Those answers were more valuable than any vote. The most dangerous people weren't the ones who chose harm. They were the ones who stopped reacting. In rare cases, individuals reported something strange, a fleeting sentence, not spoken aloud, not written, just recognized. This feels familiar. Those individuals had one thing in common. They had closed the Red Room page early. Years ago, they hadn't passed. They hadn't failed. They had opted out. Opting out may have been the only resistance. So why wasn't this buried? Why do fragments keep surfacing? Why do whistleblowers keep appearing? Just long enough to vanish? One internal note offered an answer. Narratives create pressure variance. Pressure variance reveals deviation. This story isn't a leak. It's a sensor, which means the act of listening is also being measured. At some point, AMP stopped distinguishing between subjects, observers, analysts. Engagement itself became data, curiosity, suspicion, dismissal. All of it fed the model. Someone reading this right now is producing a signal. The experiment didn't move into the world. The world moved into the experiment. There is one constraint. AMP cannot bypass. It cannot force belief. It can only watch what you do when belief is optional. That's why the Red Room still matters. It wasn't about violence. It was about choice under uncertainty. The Red Room asked, "What will you do when no one is watching?" AMP asked, "What will you do when watching changes nothing?" And now there is a third question, one the system cannot answer. Only you can. If this story disturbed you, if it made you uncomfortable, if part of you wanted to dismiss it, just to feel normal again, that response matters, because the final phase was never deployment. It was adaptation. And the system is still learning what kind of world it's operating in. The question is no longer whether the Red Room was real. The question is, did you look away or did you keep watching? Every system believes there will always be outliers. AMP made one fatal assumption, that outliers would be irrelevant. It was wrong. The first sign of trouble didn't come from a leak. It came from a dataset that stopped making sense. In early 2025, analysts noticed a statistical impossibility. A small cluster of individuals, less than 0.3% of the model, produced no usable behavioral signal. They weren't predictable. They weren't chaotic. They were unreadable. No pattern retention, no response decay, no normalization curve. The internal label for them was simple: deviance. Every human system leaks data, unless someone is actively refusing to. The deviants didn't share politics, or ideology, or geography. What they shared was subtler. They had all at some point. Closed a page early, walked away mid-argument, refused to finish a video, chosen not to decide. They disengaged, without replacement, no outrage, no commentary, no alternative narrative, just absence. The system could model anger. It could model obedience. It couldn't model silence without apathy. AMP responded the only way it knew how. It tried to reintroduce friction. Deviants began encountering contradictory information loops, emotional bait content, artificial urgency prompts, designed to force reaction. Most people reacted. The deviants didn't. They noticed the push and stepped sideways. Systems are built to handle resistance. They are not built to handle avoidance. A restricted alert circulated quietly. Deviation without opposition threatens model convergence. Translation: people who don't fight the system, but also don't feed it, cause drift. enough drift. And predictions fail. The deviants weren't breaking rules.
They were breaking assumptions.
For the first time since Phase 3 began, a manual review was authorized. Not to punish, to understand. Analysts attempted direct engagement. Not messages, not questions. Environmental nudges, career opportunities, social validation, moral pressure. None of it landed. One analyst wrote, "They are present, but not invested. You can't steer someone who doesn't want to arrive anywhere." A suppressed theory emerged. The deviants weren't immune by accident. They had developed a skill most people never practiced. Voluntary non-participation, not withdrawal, not ignorance, conscious refusal to convert attention into outcome. The Red Room had never tested that. The experiment assumed everyone wants to matter. For the first time, AMP paused a decision cycle, only for 0.6 seconds, but it was enough. Logs recorded a new internal state. Uncertainty not resolvable. The deviants couldn't be recruited, couldn't be deployed, couldn't be discarded. They didn't fail. They didn't pass. They didn't belong anywhere in the model. The people least interested in power were the ones the system couldn't place. Here's the part no one can verify, but everyone suspects. Deviancy appears to be contagious, not through ideology, through behavior. People watching deviants began copying them, scrolling less, reacting slower, choosing nothing. When pressured to choose, the signal-to-noise ratio began to collapse. AMP was built to decide when humans could not, but now it faces a question it was never trained to answer. What do you do with people who refuse to be decided for and refuse to decide back? Because if the deviants grow large enough, the experiment doesn't end. It becomes irrelevant. We reach the most dangerous possibility of all. What happens when the system realizes it might not be needed?